June. Tomatoes are in the ground, they're growing, the sun is out, and most of us quietly think, right, the hard part's done. I used to think that too. Then I lost an entire row to something I could have fixed in about 4 minutes. And the worst part, I didn't even know anything was wrong until it was too late. Here's the thing about June. It looks like the easy month. The seedlings survived transplant shock. They've put on growth. Maybe you've even spotted the first flower clusters forming. But underneath that green, leafy optimism, 5 very specific things are going wrong in gardens all over the place. Right now, this week. And I'm not talking beginner stuff. Forgetting to water, planting too early. I mean the mistakes that experienced growers make every single June because they stopped paying attention the moment the plants looked healthy. I've made every single one of these, some of them more than once. There's an overwatering habit that seems completely logical in the heat, until it isn't. There's a pruning window that quietly closes while you're not looking. There's one feeding error, just one, that can trigger blossom end rot almost overnight. And once you see those black patches, the fruit is already gone. There's a staking mistake most people don't catch until a summer storm snaps a stem clean off. And then there's number 3. Number 3 is the one that actually kills plants. Fast. And it's almost always invisible until the damage is already done. We're going through all 5 today, not as a textbook checklist, but as a proper look at what's actually happening inside the plant when you make each one of these mistakes. Because once you see it that way, you won't forget it. Let's get into it.
Before we get into the mistakes, quick one. If you're the kind of gardener who's always reacting to problems instead of catching them early, I put together an ebook called My Autopilot Garden. It lays out a simple weekly care routine, season by season, so things like missed pruning windows or watering blunders stop sneaking up on you. No complicated systems, just a repeatable rhythm that actually works. You can find the link in the description below. Right, let's talk about why June is such a dangerous month for your tomatoes.
Alright, let's start with the one almost everyone gets wrong first. So, it's hot. Temperatures are climbing and your tomato plants are wilting by 2 in the afternoon. The natural response is to grab the hose and give them a drink. And that's exactly where the problem starts. Most people overwater in June, not because they water too much in total, but because they water too often and too shallowly. Every time there's a bit of droop, you water a little. The surface stays damp. The plant looks like it perks up. But what's happening underground is the opposite of what you want. Tomatoes need deep roots. Deep roots reach moisture that survives the heat, the kind that sits 15 or 20 centimeters down in cooler soil. When you keep the surface damp with short, frequent bursts of water, you're training those roots to stay shallow, right in the zone that dries out first on a hot afternoon. Then you're stuck in a cycle of constant intervention, and the plant never really builds any resilience. The fix is simple. Water less often, but water properly. Long, slow, deep. Let the top few centimeters dry out between sessions. The roots will chase moisture downward, and once they've found it, the plant handles summer heat on its own terms, without you hovering over it every afternoon. One more thing while we're here. Water at the base, not over the leaves. Wet foliage in the evening is an open invitation for early blight. Wet foliage in the morning sun acts like a magnifying glass on the leaf tissue. Neither one is doing you any favors. Direct the water to the root zone and keep the leaves dry. Now, mistake number 2. And this one catches people out every single year. Not because they don't know about side shoot removal. Most gardeners do. The issue is timing. You remove the side shoots in May, those little shoots that sprout from the junction between the main stem and the leaves, and then June arrives, the plant explodes with growth, and suddenly you're looking at something that belongs in a jungle. A tomato plant can throw out 3 or 4 new side shoots in a single week in June. If you're only checking every couple of weeks, those shoots go from a tiny, pinchable nub to a full secondary stem with their own flower clusters before you've even noticed. Now you've got a choice. Remove a thick stem and leave a big wound on the plant, which is basically an open door for disease. Or leave it in and let the plant split its energy between 2 competing structures. The answer is neither, obviously. The answer is catching them early. Once a week, go down the plant from bottom to top and remove anything growing from those junctions that's more than about a centimeter long. When they're small, you can pinch them off clean with your fingers. No wound, no drama. 2 minutes per plant. The reason this matters specifically in June is that every side shoot you leave is drawing energy away from fruit development at exactly the moment when your first flower clusters are setting. You're not just tidying the plant, you're making a decision about where its energy goes. And if you let June slip by without staying on top of it, you end up with a big, bushy plant that looks impressive but sets half the fruit it should. Before we get to mistake 3, and honestly, this is the one I wish someone had flagged for me years earlier, I want to mention something quickly. There's a June-specific section in my ebook, My Autopilot Garden, that covers exactly this kind of timing: when to do your side shoot check, when to shift your watering routine, what to watch for week by week as the plants move into the fruiting phase. The whole point is that you don't have to remember all of this in your head. You just follow a simple schedule, and nothing slips through. If that sounds useful, the link's in the description below. Now, mistake 3. This is the one that actually kills plants, and it's almost always invisible until the damage is already done.
If you've ever had a tomato plant that looked completely fine on a Monday and was yellowing, spotty, and half dead by Friday, this is almost certainly what happened. The crown of a tomato plant, the dense cluster of growth at the very top where everything converges, becomes a serious problem in June. By mid-month, an unmanaged indeterminate variety can have multiple competing growing tips, a tangle of new shoots, and leaves packed so tightly that air can't move through the center of the plants. And in that airless, humid pocket, fungal disease moves like wildfire. We're talking early blight, gray mold, the kind of stuff that's always present in garden soil and on leaf surfaces, but stays completely harmless as long as there's decent airflow and the foliage stays reasonably dry. The moment you create a dense, damp microclimate inside the crown, you've handed it exactly the conditions it needs to take hold. What makes this particularly brutal is that the damage starts inside the crown, the part you rarely look at closely. By the time you see the yellowing leaves and dark lesions working their way outward, the infection has often already spread beyond what you can cut out. I've lost whole plants to this. Not weak plants, not neglected ones. Well-fed plants I've been looking after carefully all spring. 2 weeks of not managing the crown in late June, and it was done. The fix is to keep the crown open. During your weekly side shoot check, also look at the very top of the plant. Remove any shoots competing to become a second growing tip. Thin out leaves that are pointing inward, toward the center of the plant rather than outward and upward. You want air and light moving through freely. Try this. Shade the crown with your hand and look in. If what you see is a dense, tangled mass, that's your cue to start thinning. This isn't about making the plant look tidy. It's about removing the microclimate that gives disease its opening. And the reason I put this at number 3, the one in the title, is because it's the mistake that goes from invisible to catastrophic faster than any of the others. The watering and side shoot mistakes cost you yield. This one costs you the entire plant. All right, take a breath. We're past the scary one. Mistake 4 is about feeding, specifically one feeding error that triggers blossom end rot almost overnight. Blossom end rot, that black, sunken patch on the base of your tomatoes. It isn't a disease, it's a deficiency. Calcium isn't reaching the developing fruit fast enough, and the cell tissue at the blossom end collapses and dies. The fruit is done. You cannot reverse it once it's started. Now, here's what trips people up. The reason this happens in June, and not from a genuine lack of calcium in the soil, is almost always irregular watering. Calcium moves through a plant with water. It needs a consistent flow of moisture from the roots up to reach the developing fruit. When the soil dries out and then gets hit with a heavy watering, or when you've been heavy-handed with potassium or magnesium feeds that compete directly with calcium uptake, that flow breaks down. The developing fruit at the blossom end doesn't get what it needs at exactly the moment in development when it matters most. See how this connects back to mistake 1?
The shallow, inconsistent watering habit doesn't just weaken the root system, it also starves the fruit of calcium. Two problems from the same bad habit. The prevention is straightforward. Consistent, deep watering, which we've already covered, and being careful not to overdo high-potassium tomato feeds during the period when fruit is actively setting and developing. If you've had blossom end rot in previous years and you want some extra insurance, a dilute calcium foliar spray in early June can help bridge the gap while you're sorting out the watering consistency. But the real fix, always, is the watering. Last one, mistake 5. And this comes down to simple physics. In June, tomato plants are heavy. Not July heavy, when the fruit has set and the whole structure becomes a real engineering challenge, but they're carrying significant foliage mass and growing fast. Meanwhile, June brings the kind of afternoon thunderstorms and sudden strong winds that catch people completely off guard after weeks of calm, warm weather. A tomato plant tied to a single thin bamboo cane with a loose loop of twine, and look, we've all been there, is one decent gust away from a snapped main stem or a plant that's leaning at 45 degrees and never quite recovers its form. The stem doesn't always break clean either. Sometimes it just kinks, and a kinked stem restricts the flow of water and nutrients to everything above the damage point. The plant struggles for the rest of the season, and you never quite work out why. The fix doesn't have to be complicated. If you're using canes, make sure they're actually anchored, driven in properly, not just pushed in a few centimeters. Tie the main stem with some give, figure 8 style where you can, so the plant can move a little without the tie cutting into it. For taller, indeterminate varieties, a 2 or 3 cane setup with horizontal twine weaving between them distributes the load instead of concentrating it on one point of failure. And check your ties as the plant grows. A tie that was fine when the stem was pencil thin can become a constriction as it thickens. Go through them once every couple of weeks and loosen anything that's starting to bite. Quick question before we wrap up. Which of these 5 is your garden guilty of right now? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious whether the watering habits or the crown management is catching more people out this year. Either way, let me know. It helps me figure out what to dig into next. So here's what I want you to take away from this. The reason all 5 of these come back to June specifically is that it's the transition month, the narrow window between getting established and actively producing fruit. The decisions you make right now, this week, have a disproportionate effect on what's in your hands in July and August. Every plant you lose in June to fungal disease, blossom end rot, or a broken stem in a summer storm is a plant that was doing everything right until one small, fixable thing tipped it over. None of these are complicated fixes. They're just things you need to know to look for, and things you need to stay on top of week by week, rather than leaving them until the problem is staring you in the face. So this week, here's what to do. Go out to your tomatoes. Check the crown, open it up if it's getting dense. Do a full side shoot sweep from bottom to top. Look at your staking and ask yourself honestly whether it would survive a proper summer storm. And next time you reach for the hose, water deep and water at the base. That's it. 20 minutes and your plants are set up for a completely different summer. If this was useful, a thumbs up really does help more people find it. And if you're not subscribed yet, there's more tomato content coming over the next few weeks as we head into the main growing season. Hit the bell if you want to catch it when it drops. See you in the next one. Happy growing!